and all is still go as we monitor our status for it. Good luck and Godspeed.
Have you ever had a premonition, a feeling that something dreadful was about to happen?
No, Mother, I have not been drinking.
Do you happen to have a pair of birds that are just friendly?
We all go a little mad sometimes.
I have to go back into the past once more, just once more.
This is HitchPod, a podcast counting down the 20 best movies of the wonderful 20th century director Alfred Hitchcock. I'm Kat Jones and with me is Dan Libke. And in this episode, we're comparing the 13th best Hitchcock movie, Rebecca, with a movie that the Oscars deemed to be completely undeserving of a single nomination, His Girl Friday. And just a reminder, we usually compare the Hitchcock movie to the Best Picture winner because, of course, very rarely does Hitchcock win it.
Very rarely.
But Rebecca won Best Picture and that ruined those plans. So we've gone the complete opposite way.
Yes, we've gone with His Girl Friday. So, so that's what we'll be comparing. But before we get to that, we'll do our usual trick here, which is where we give a cryptic clue at the top of the podcast for what our 12th best movie might be.
Our next podcast.
So the 12th best Hitchcock film will be, the clue is always in the form of a cryptic crossword style clue. So here we go. Here's the clue to the 12th best movie. See if you can work it out before the end of the episode. So here's the clue. The reason why Alma wasn't credited for this film? ? And that's 3 letters, 4 letters, 8 letters. So the reason why Alma wasn't credited for this film? So there you go. So puzzle on that as you listen to the rest of this podcast and we'll tell you the answer at the end of the episode.
So we're going to start off with some basic information about His Girl Friday. So what year did this movie come from?
So this is a 1940 movie, just same as Rebecca. It has an IMDb score of 7.8 out of 10 and a very excellent Rotten Tomatoes score of 99%. This is where I usually pop in with a negative review.
Yeah.
Almost impossible to find a negative review of this one. Presumably it's not 100%, so there are ones out there, but no contemporaneous ones for this particular movie. But it was, however, awarded 0 nominations at the Oscars. Poor His Girl Friday.
That's right. I mean, that sometimes happens with comedies, but there are a few comedies in the mix for Academy Awards over the years.
Yes, but not this one. It's but you can watch it. It's available to stream for free on Amazon Prime in the US, UK and Australia. You can get a very fancy Criterion Collection 2-disc DVD or Blu-ray that contains the movie and a restored version of the play it's based on, director interviews and other featurettes. Or if you're really cheap, you don't have to pay at all because it's in the public domain. So if you Google His Girl Friday, you can get it for free. Very easy to find.
And it has some of our favourite Hitchcock actors, mainly Cary Grant.
Yes.
And he is playing the character of Walter Burns, newspaper man.
Yes, newspaper editor I think he is. And his star reporter is Rosalind Russell playing Hildy Johnson. And I guess the other main character of the movie is Ralph Bellamy, who's playing Bruce Baldwin. And the thing I like about Ralph Bellamy is that he was still appearing in movies 50 years later.
He was
in Pretty Woman in 1990.
No.
What
part was he?
Some very old man. But we've also seen him relatively recently because we did one of our episodes, a Hitchcockification or something, on Trading Places. He was in Trading Places. He was one of the old dudes in Trading Places.
Oh, my goodness.
So
what a long career.
Yeah.
That's fabulous.
Yep. So that's a little bit of trivia there for. So he's 5 decades later, still going on. No, not now. Now he's dead. But he lasted another 50 years after this one.
Yeah.
So the synopsis of this movie is a newspaper editor uses every trick in the book to keep his ace reporter ex-wife from remarrying. And it was the screenplay was written by Charles Lederer. And that was based on a play by Ben Hecht and Charles MacArthur. And we know Ben Hecht because he wrote Notorious. And the director was Howard Hawks, who was a pretty well-established director by this stage. He'd worked with Cary Grant a couple of years earlier on Bringing Up Baby, a similar kind of style, screwball comedy kind of, that Katharine Hepburn, I believe, was in that one. And he just kept on making plenty more movies. He went another 30 years, so plenty of long careers for everybody involved in this film. He basically, probably most famously, Rio Bravo, Gentlemen Prefer Blondes, To Have and Have Not, etc. And this is listed in IMDb as a comedy/drama/romance, pretty heavy on the comedy. I think it's a screwball comedy. And I got a couple of taglines here for you. So first tagline, the raciest love battle in years, exclamation mark, a wild, witty whirlwind of hysterics.
Well, I think a wild, witty whirlwind of hysterics is correct.
So it describes it pretty well.
Yeah.
And the other one that I found quite amusing was, meet the woman behind the man behind the news.
Oh, that's great. That is really very catchy. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
there you go. So we are about to recap the plot of the movie. So if you want to watch it without being spoiled, now's the time to duck off and go watch the movie. As we mentioned, very easy to find. Google it up, watch it. It takes about 90 minutes to watch, and then come back here and listen to the rest of it. Or if you don't care, I'm about to do the plot now. So
And I might say this is one of those movies where it doesn't matter if you're spoiled. You could still watch it. In fact, you'll probably predict the ending in the first 5 minutes of the movie. Maybe even the first 2 minutes.
Doesn't take long.
Doesn't take long.
Yes.
So, yeah, you will still enjoy this and you will not be able to get the full experience from our podcast because the full experience comes by listening to
We'd have to talk over one another all the time.
Oh, absolutely. It's quite incredible.
Yeah, and we have to talk about 20 times fast. You have to listen to us on about 1.9 speed to get the full experience of this movie.
Definitely. It is a sort of movie you want to slow down, isn't it? Anyway, I hope you don't go quite that fast on the recap.
I will not. So we do start with an opening disclaimer about the ruthlessness of the press. So this disclaimer reads, it all happened in the dark ages of the newspaper game when to a reporter getting that story justified anything short of murder. Incidentally, you will see in this picture no resemblance to the men and women of the press today. Ready?
Was that the first joke?
I'm not sure whether it was supposed to be a joke, but I'm not sure whether they were covering their butts or trying to make a joke. I mean, they knew they were going to be reviewed by the press. Anyway, ready? Well, once upon a time, and that's when the movie starts. So very strange. I think more movies should have disclaimers like this up the top. It would be very entertaining about anything that's got a negative light.
It was totally out of genre to have this warning at the start. Like, it's not even a true story or anything, and it's a comedy. So I presume it was a joke.
I assume so.
A very subtle one. I don't think anyone would have laughed.
No. Anyway, we start with Hildy Johnson. This is Rosalind Russell in a very good hat.
Oh, yes.
She's a very spectacular hat. And she's arrived at some offices with a pretty dopey boyfriend named Bruce. And Bruce is played by Ralph Bellamy.
Dopey's such a great word for him.
He's very dopey. Anyway, we quickly also learn that Hildy is the ex-wife of Walter. That's played by Cary Grant, and he's the editor of the newspaper called The Morning Post. But she is more than just his ex. She is also his former star reporter. And so he's horrified on multiple levels when he discovers that she is going to marry Dopey Bruce and not return to the paper. Instead, she's just going to be a housewife in Albany. Worse still, she's getting married tomorrow, and even worse than that, she's getting on a train in a few hours. So there's this situation is about to get much, much worse very quickly. So the desperate and ruthless Walter invites himself to lunch with the two of them and tries to convince her to cover one last story for him. And this story is the upcoming execution of Earl Williams, and he's just some random dude convicted of shooting a policeman. So Hildy agrees to do the story, but only if Walter agrees to buy life insurance from Bruce. And this life insurance policy will give Bruce a $1,000 commission, which will help with whatever wedding expenses they have. And so she heads off to the jail to interview this Earl character, and Walter heads off to get a physical for this insurance policy. Anyway, Earl claims that he shot the police officer by accident, and Hildy starts writing her story, and she's clearly beloved by everybody else in the press gang in their little room. There's a little press room. They've all got individual phones, which are like the equivalent of mobile phones for the time.
It was brilliant. The individual phones were just so good.
So the phones are those ones where like you've got a handle and you pull out the handle and hold it to your ear and then pick it up like a microphone stand and speak into it. So it's a very classic old-timey telephones, but everyone's got their own one to dial into their own newspapers with all the details of the story.
I feel like if someone could invent that for podcasting, it would be insanely popular for those people who do the YouTube videos of their podcasts. It would be so great. And, you don't have headphones.
We'd be buying two instantly.
Oh yeah.
It's very cool. And of course, when I say dial in, of course you didn't dial in those days. It's operator put me through to my newspaper. Anyway, Walter is back getting his physical for his life insurance policy. This is all happening very rapidly. He's had about 3 hours to come up with this plan before she gets on a train and leaves forever. So everything motors along. No one has anything else to do that afternoon.
Yeah.
So Walter's getting the physical for his life insurance policy, and he starts causing mischief almost immediately. He's got some pickpocket on retainer as part of his staff. And this pickpocket tries to steal the money that he pays Bruce to get this life insurance policy. And somehow this pickpocket also manages to frame Bruce for stealing a watch. So Bruce is off to jail. He's been framed. He's been arrested. And Hildy hears about this, and she's all annoyed because she knows exactly what happens. She knows what kind of man Walter is and how he's behind all this stuff. And Bruce just fell into the trap. So she's written her story, but she rings up Walter and tears the story up over the phone and says, I promised you I'd write it, but I didn't promise that I'd send it through to you to publish. So she's got out of that one on a technicality. And that seems to be where, she's going to hook up with Bruce. They're going to get on the train and go. But just as they're about to do that, we learn that sirens start blaring and Williams has escaped from jail. And suddenly Hildy can't resist. She's back on the job because there's a jail escape and a hot story. And somehow around about here, Bruce gets framed again and goes back to jail again. That's a bit of a running gag for poor old Bruce. So things escalate from here. So Williams sneaks into the press room and Hildy hides him in a desk, and then all the other reporters return to the room. I think they were all off looking for him or trying to get the story. Hildy at one point chases after somebody and tackles them. And it's all
like
very dramatic.
The prison keeper who had all of the news.
That's right, yes.
She knew that would be the person to grab. So she got the best story, as is, I think, she would have always done in the past.
Yes. So she went back to start writing up her version of the story, and that's when Williams showed up, and she was the only one there, so he pulled a gun on her. She quickly disarmed him, claimed the gun for herself and said, you hide in the desk. So everybody else comes back, and also William's girlfriend Molly, who we've seen a little bit earlier, Hildy interviewed, and she was claiming they weren't girlfriend and boyfriend, but the relationship was very convoluted. Anyway, the reporters start harassing her for information about what's going on, and suddenly she just leaps out of the window to her death. Or seemingly her death. I assume she died.
No one cares.
Yeah. Well, the reporters care enough that they rush down to investigate, which gives Hildy a bit more time to, have a chat with the dude in the desk. But he didn't seem to care that much that she just randomly killed herself.
It was crazy.
Yes. Anyway, around about this point, we also have Mrs. Baldwin. This is Hildy's future mother-in-law. She pops in and she starts hanging about saying, why aren't you, with my boy getting on this train? Because she's getting the train up with them. And
you can't have a screwball comedy without a mother-in-law.
Mother-in-law is always fresh-faced comedy in the 1940s. So she's a terrifying figure, but Walter shows up with his pickpocket henchman and he just literally picks her up and carries her out of the room. So she's out of the scene for the moment. So now we've just got Walter and Hildy trying to work out how to get this desk containing Williams out of there so that they can get the scoop all to themselves. And somehow things get even crazier from this point because the henchman returns while he's been driving mother-in-law away. He's crashed the car into a police car and she might be dead. He doesn't know.
No,
he just sprinted off. Around about now, the mayor and the sheriff show up as well. The rest of the press pack returns. And I think Bruce is also out of jail by now somehow. And he's shown up and he's telling Hildy that, I'm sorry, I've got to catch this last train. She's too busy writing the story to even notice. So he's kind of off in a huff. And around about now, everybody discovers that Williams is in the desk because Walter's making some elaborate speech and he knocks 3 times on the desk, which was supposed to be a signal or something. He accidentally knocks 3 times. All very implausible. Anyway, Walter and Hildy are arrested and they're handcuffed by the sheriff who says, you've been hiding a felon. You're bad news. And then, I forgot to mention, the mayor and the sheriff also received a message from some clown a bit earlier, the day before. And that message was from the governor saying that Williams had received a reprieve for some reason. But the mayor and the sheriff needed him executed because they were running for election on a tough on crime platform. So they wanted him executed. So they told this dimwit to go away and come back the next day after presumably he'd been executed. But now he's back and he has the governor's reprieve again. And this information is enough for Walter to use that information to blackmail the mayor and sheriff into releasing him and Hildy. And Bruce is back in jail again somehow.
Yep.
Because he used some counterfeit money that Walter gave him. So Hildy's
I think even his mother at this point is sick of him being in jail.
Well, certainly Hildy's sick enough. She's had enough of being engaged to somebody so stupid, which Walter pounces upon the opportunity. He proposes to her. She agrees. Why not? What the hell? Let's get married again. They decide they'll head to Niagara Falls for their honeymoon. But that's when Walter discovers there's some breaking news story in Albany. So that was where she was originally supposed to go with Bruce. So that's where they're going to end up going anyway. And that's where they'll get married. And that's the end of the movie. So there you go. What did you think of that one?
I mean, I really did enjoy it. I think we both particularly enjoyed the start. I think it started extremely strongly and then it just got a little bit dull for me when they were stuck in the press room and it turned in this sort of bottle scene of them just never getting out. You could tell it was a stage play and they hadn't thought perhaps hard enough about getting out of that room, which was a problem back in the 40s, I think when plays were being turned into movies. So I think that is where they missed their Academy Award.
Very, very possible. That's the only thing that cost them for sure.
Yeah.
As you say, I love the first half. I love the back and forth between Hildy and Walter when they first showed up. The dialogue was, really snappy and some great lines in there. A great, running reversal bit where they talked about divorce in marriage terms. And I think we'll go over that in the best quotes.
That was great.
And some really great dialogue. But at the point where all the subplots with the sheriffs and the mayors and the governors, too many levels of government for me to keep track of. I wasn't sure who was corrupt and who was good and what really was going on.
You have to presume that people of the time would have understood that a bit better because it felt like there was too much riding on which official was higher than which other official and it was a little difficult for us to tell.
And that's also an American thing as well. I think, that's their system of government. We don't really have sheriffs and mayors and governors. And so, it's slightly different. And then, I think right at the end, as you say, when they're all locked in that room, and it kind of escalates to a farce level at that point. And there's sometimes I can enjoy the odd farce. It's pretty rare though. I think it needs to be based in a higher level of reality before it gets to farce than this.
There wasn't enough satire at that point. There was more satire and misdirection at the very start, which made it more fun.
Yep.
And you're right. That little bit too screwball. By the time they start doing visual gags of people hiding in desks and people jumping out of windows and it being funny, I just wasn't quite there for me, I think.
But the first bit's fantastic. I loved Cary Grant just high statusing poor old Bruce. Everything that Bruce was saying, Cary Grant was one step ahead of him, one step smarter.
Yeah.
And you could see that even in the way they spoke. Cary Grant really rapid fire speaking, Bruce speaking much slower, much more measured, and it's had the effect of making him sound dumber. Which it
was very cleverly done, and you could see immediately that Hildy was not compatible with this slow Bruce character. Even his name was great.
Poor Bruce.
Also, the moment where he pretends to misrecognise another very old man as Bruce at the very start was incredibly funny.
Yep.
I mean, I think even Bruce going to prison repeatedly was really funny.
Yeah, that was a good running.
It certainly was. It was perhaps funnier on the retelling, but
Yes.
I also loved the other thing I particularly loved with the ability to make a comedy point about Albany as a town or a city. The sledging of Albany as being boring, cold, populated by mother-in-laws, and of course they end up getting diverted there for their honeymoon at the end, which is really funny as well.
Yep.
But the fact that they managed to give us that as a piece of humour just by, we don't really know anything about this city, but we know what they thought about it. Yeah, I think it's really great. I mean, this is a very famous movie, isn't it, as far as screwball comedies go?
It's very beloved. It's pretty much an archetype of the genre. It was the American Film Institute did 100 Years of 100 Laughs list, which was a list they made in 2000 of the funniest American comedies. This one was number 19, so it's right up there with the very best comedies.
I would have seen this a couple of times when I was a kid. I don't think I understood it, so it was very familiar to me. The whole thing was extremely familiar. It might have even been the first Cary Grant movie that I saw.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Parts of it seem familiar to me too, but then I have seen a couple of snippets of Cary Grant screwball comedies, and I'm not sure I know which one's which.
He's the same guy in everyone.
Yeah. It's also one of Quentin Tarantino's favourite movies.
Now that is a fact stranger than fiction.
It's very strange, isn't it?
Why would he like that, do you think?
I don't know. I mean, Tarantino's like a master of this kind of dialogue, like this he's just a dialogue expert. Like he has people talking about quarter pounders and stuff, and that's somehow riveting, and I don't know how he does it, but he does it. But having said all that, I think the title is terrible. I think it's a really bad title. It's got, it's obviously now attached to the movie, so nobody really thinks about it this much.
No.
But it's obviously a reference to Robinson Crusoe's Man Friday, which is used to describe a servant or a PA or whatever. But I don't think it works in this movie. It certainly doesn't work in a literal sense. She's not even his employee. She's hired for this one-off job at this stage. Yeah. And it doesn't really work in an ironic sense either. I don't really see how it works in either sense. So I've seen it claimed it's meant ironically, which is it's pretty lame sense of irony.
I don't think it's very good ironically either.
No.
But I think that it is a good title in some ways. And the reason is because I think at the very end of the movie, that's all she is. So I think it's like cruel kind of...
You reckon?
Final point on this movie.
I think that's far too strong to say that that's what she becomes in the end. She's an equal to him. She doesn't put up with any of his shit.
So we're seeing, it's kind of amusing to think that maybe she's an equal. That would have been amusing of that time. It's part of the humour. But at the very end, the very last line of this movie, Walter asks Hildy, hey, why don't you carry that thing in your hand? And he's suggesting that, instead of the suitcase that she's carrying, he doesn't offer to carry it for her. She will carry her own suitcase, and she's walking behind him again. So it's different times in the movie she's walking ahead of him. Yeah. At the very end of the movie, it's not a good ending for her. She is back to being kind of his slave, and I think that's probably the only point where maybe his Girl Friday is true, because as you say, for most of the movie she's well and truly front and centre as the lead in this. He's not doing much in this. He's kind of a passenger for most of the movie, right?
Yeah. He disappears for the entire middle bit.
So she's back to being, a career woman perhaps and her star reporter, but is that really what she wanted? She hurries after him with her case. She's carrying her in suitcase, and she's more like a servant, she's his wife. She might be a reporter, but she's also his girlfriend.
She's already been his wife. They'll be divorced again in 6 months, so
exactly.
It doesn't really...
There's no way it's a happy ending for her, and she's not persisting in this happy ending.
I guess you could take that interpretation. I still don't see it. I don't see her as being, subservient to him in any way. I think she's marrying him because whatever attraction they've got is back, and she's escaped by the skin of her teeth from dopey old Bruce. Yep. She said, I'll go with this more exciting, dashing man, and that buzz will wear off soon, and then she'll go back to being a squabbling reporter with him again.
I think it's a little bit dark, that ending, and that is probably because of, and it may be very subtle, as we say, it's because of Hecht and his screenplay. He wrote the screenplay, didn't he? Or was it Charles Lederer who wrote the screenplay?
Lederer wrote the screenplay.
Okay,
Hecht wrote the play.
So Hecht wrote Notorious as well. So there's this sort of double-edged sword of the woman who gets what she wants, but does she really? Yeah. And I think that sort of shines through here. But I mean, the original screenplay, she wasn't a woman anyway. So I think it's a very interesting and slightly dark ending. And again, maybe that's a reason why Tarantino likes it.
Yeah, maybe.
There is quite a bit of darkness in here because Walter is such an awful
he's
man.
A terrible man. He's a very, very unpleasant man.
And he's being presented as the romantic lead in an attractive sense. Yet all the women watching and the men watching can see that he's not very attractive in a number of ways. I think it's a very interesting mixture of comedy and dark humour as well. Yeah. I think it's good. So you don't like the title, His Girl Friday?
Yeah. So
what would you like? What would you call it?
Well, I sought assistance from our good friend ChatGPT here.
Great.
I put in a description. I can't remember what it was now, but give me a title for His Girl Friday, utilising the basic plot, but with some wordplay or something in the title. So it came up with 5 options for me, and I'll give them to you here. So the first one it says is Ink Interrupted, the editor's exclusive.
Now, ChatGPT just loves a freaking semicolon, doesn't it? Or colon.
Yep.
Ink Interrupted is a much better title, I reckon. Ink Interrupted. What was the subtitle there?
The subtitle was The Editor's Exclusive.
Oh my God. That could have been a title on its own.
Yeah.
The editor's exclusive.
Yeah.
That is
It's not bad.
it's pretty good.
Yeah.
And it could be that it could have been a good tagline for the movie as well.
Yeah.
Potentially. Okay. Well, that's a pretty good start.
That's a pretty good start. It drops off pretty quickly.
Okay.
So we've got newsroom nuptials and nonsense. So a
No,
bit of
that's-
alliteration there. Bit more alliteration. Front page fiance fiasco. Love that
Okay.
one.
Well, that's she's not really a fiance, so it doesn't quite fit.
Yeah, she was the fiance of Bruce,
Oh, she was too.
and that was the fiasco.
Well, maybe that's okay. Yeah.
Breaking hearts and headlines.
That's all right. No, that's not too bad.
Yeah, and last one, paper pouts and post-proposal problems.
Wow.
Pouts is a very strange word to have in there, but there you go.
Yeah.
Just in there for the purr sound.
Yes.
So
I
there
think
you
I
go.
like that first one.
Ink interrupted, the editor's exclusive.
One or the other. I think it's a bit much to
That is
have
a bit
both
much.
of them.
They're both decent, yeah.
I think you're right. I think they're better than His Girl Friday. I've got another little fact here. First of all, I wanted to say the scene where Hildy turns from I'm on my way to Albany, I've got my winter coat on, I've got my suitcase, and then the action starts up in the press room and she takes her coat off. That is an amazing scene because
Yep.
she's just at the door with her hand on the door. She's almost out the door. She's almost at the train, off to
Yep.
the train station, and then she just drops the coat.
Yeah.
And forevermore, the coat is in the scene. Every scene in
really?
that newsroom,
Yep.
you can see the coat on the periphery, and she never puts it back on
Yep.
until sort of towards the end. She might, I can't remember, but it's just wonderful the way she changes back into a news reporter from her, potential housewifery status. Yeah, I think it's really good. And Rosalind Russell, I'll just give you another little factoid about Rosalind Russell. Oh no, maybe I'll save it for the director section.
Okay, well, let's head into the director's section now.
Okay, yep.
And this was going to be originally a straight adaptation of The Front Page, which was a play. And
I'm glad they didn't call it The Front Page.
no.
That sounds a bit too drama, doesn't it?
It is a bit dull. But Hawkes decided, the director decided he wanted to gender flip the reporter role. So Cary Grant was originally going to be the reporter, and the editor was also a man in the original movie.
Yeah, right.
And Bruce was a female fiance in the original
Yep.
in the original versions, but that's all been flipped around now. And apparently he decided to flip Hildy's part because he had his secretary read the reporter's line during auditions, and he liked how they sounded coming from a woman. So he thought, well, this actually sounds pretty good. And Hildy's such a strange name that because I think it was Hildy originally.
Was Hildebrand
Right.
the man's name? And so they just changed it to Hildegard.
Okay. There you go.
Yeah.
Yes. So she got the role, and I genuinely can't imagine the movie with this being two men. I think it's a much more boring movie. I mean, it's all about this kind of crackle between these two.
Wow.
Yeah. So apparently there was lots of spontaneity and ad-libbing on set.
Yes. Was it the fastest dialogue ever filmed at the time?
Yes, it was the fastest dialogue ever filmed. I think he went out of his way to do it. So I think because there was an earlier version of The Front Page shot like even more faithfully. This is the play basically filmed with two men.
I can't imagine how boring it would be if it was two men. Like the whole point of this is the friction between the man and the woman.
Yep.
There's no point to them.
Yeah.
Really, otherwise.
Yeah, it does seem very odd. But yeah, apparently that one had extremely fast dialogue, and Hawkes was comparing that movie to this one and making sure that his was faster.
Oh, wow.
So he was very keen on that. And he also encouraged, all this ad-libbing stuff. And Cary Grant was ad-libbing a lot during the movie. We'll come to a couple of his lines that he ad-libbed. But Rosalind Russell said in her autobiography that she thought she didn't have as many good lines as Cary Grant did.
Yeah.
So she hired her own writer to punch up her dialogue.
Oh, wow, that is so great. I love it. Particularly as she's playing the newspaper reporter.
Yeah.
That's even better.
Yeah. And apparently most of them didn't really catch on what was going on, except for Cary Grant, who, as the movie went on, or as the shooting of the movie went on, would come to greet her every morning, say, "What have you got today?" So
more movies should do this. Just say, look, you can ad lib, and by the way, off you go, see who can be the wittiest. I think that's fantastic.
yes, very good.
I mean, I think the reversal, making Hildy a woman, really was adding to the comedy, presumably back then, but now it comes across as quite progressive. So
Yeah.
this sort of adds to the sparkle of the film, seeing it in modern times, because, you know, it really just comes across as normal for us.
It's fantastic.
You don't need it as comedy at all. I'll give you some more information about Rosalind Russell. She married a guy, a Danish-American producer called Frederick Brisson. I'm not sure when. No, in 1941. So she already knew Cary Grant at this point. And Cary Grant was responsible for setting them up.
Oh, okay.
And it was a bit of a long con. So I'll give you the story. Eventually he was the best man at Frederick and Rosalind's wedding. So, you know, friends with both of them.
Yep.
So Brisson was travelling from England to the United States by ship in 1939. The previous movie Rosalind was in was playing on an endless loop during the voyage, and he heard he watched the movie and he kind of fell for her in the movie. And I don't know how famous he was, so presumably reasonably famous. And he decided
Famous enough to know Cary Grant.
I think yes. I think that's pretty famous. So he said, he turned to his friends and said, I'm either going to kill that girl or I'm going to marry her. So maybe he wasn't the best husband. We'll just let that go. Anyway, he basically was enough of a friend of Cary Grant that he stayed in his guest house when Grant was filming. Actually, no, maybe it was Grant staying in his guest house. Anyway, they
shared a house.
They shared a house during his Girl Friday. And when Brisson heard that Grant was making the movie with Russell, he said, "Oh, can you set us up?"
Yep.
And of course, Cary Grant said, "Yep, all right, I'll do something about it." But of course, they were too busy. So all he did was he greeted Russell every morning on set with that question we heard before, which was, "Did you punch up your dialogue?" But also, "Have you met Freddie Brisson yet?" She didn't know who he was, and so in an effort to, you know, sort of get her a bit curious about who is this guy, and then one night, you know, when they were going to go out dancing, of course, Brisson came along, and he introduced him and sheepishly kind of explained that this is Freddie Brisson, and now you have met the man I was mentioning so often, and off they went for dinner, and then they ended up together.
That's such a good setup technique. I'm going to use that next time I want to set somebody up.
Yeah.
Just say to them over and over, have you met Mary McDougall yet? Have you met Mary?
It is great.
Because
isn't
it builds such anticipation.
Yeah.
It's very good.
Yeah.
Good work, Cary.
I think that's fantastic. And I reckon that'd make a good movie. All the screenwriters out there, off you go.
Yes. All right. So speaking of screenwriters, have we got some good lines from this one?
Yes.
I mean, there's zillions of good lines.
There
we
are
won't try
some,
and do them all.
There's some really good lines. I mean, I think that great running reversal when they're talking about their divorce in marriage terms, you know, did we get divorced too soon? Yeah. Or we never really gave our divorce a chance, which is very funny. Yeah. I think that was excellent, and that set it up early. It was really good.
Yeah, so Walter says, you've got an old-fashioned idea divorce is something that lasts forever, till death do us part. Why, divorce doesn't mean anything nowadays, Hildy. Just a few words mumbled over you by a judge.
Yeah, really
fantastic.
Great. Really fantastic.
Yes.
And then a wonderful line, these ad-libbed by Cary Grant. Walter was talking about someone and saying, he looks like that fellow, you're talking about Bruce
yep.
saying he looks like that fellow in the movies, Ralph Bellamy, which is so great because, of course, it was Ralph Bellamy. Yes. Very funny.
Yes. And the other one I've got here from the beginning, which is where all the best dialogue was taking place, was Walter at one point says, "Look, Hildy, I only acted like any husband that didn't want to see his home broken up." And she goes, "What home?" And he says, "What home? Don't you remember the home I promised you?" So, yes, very good.
I also loved it when Cary Grant as Walter Burns says, "Listen, the last man that said that to me was Archie Leach, just a week before he cut his throat."
Yep.
And, of course, that's Cary Grant's real name.
Yep, Archie Leach.
So I guess that was also an ad-libbed line?
Yeah, that was ad-libbed, yeah. And the only reason I know that is because that's why I learned that fact watching A Fish Called Wanda, because John Cleese's character in that is Archie Leach, and he chose that name because that was Cary Grant's real name.
Oh,
and
fantastic.
I got that piece of information, in 1989 or whenever that was.
Yep.
That's just stuck in the back of my brain forever.
Yes. I guess you don't want a name called Leach.
No.
And maybe Archie was a bit too common back then.
Maybe.
So anyway, we know Cary Grant was trying to escape a fairly common starting point in his life, and Cary Grant is such a wonderful name.
It is a wonderful name. All right, so what else have we got here? We've got the Bechdel test. Does this one pass?
Yes, well, it has to have at least two named women in it who talk to each other about something besides a man, and doesn't pass.
It doesn't pass. It had more of a chance than it would have without the gender swap, I think. But even with the gender swap, our only real chance is when the other woman, Molly, I think that was her name, shows up.
I think it passes
but they
the
don't
first
really
two
talk
parts.
about anything,
Yeah, they only talk about a man.
Yeah.
So they do talk to each other, that condemned guy's girlfriend.
Yeah. Yeah.
But only about the condemned guy.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. What about technology? How could modern technology impact or improve or change the plot of this one?
I think I'd like to see the press room with the modern devices instead of the old telephones.
Yep.
But
Dinging with notifications.
yeah, I think maybe what would make it more interesting, as of course any movie these days with mobile phones, is if somehow the network went down and so they had to do their communication by some kind of old-fashioned means. I think that would have made the modern movie a little bit more interesting than them just being on their laptops and emailing their various people. A lot of the fast dialogue was the pressmen picking up the phones and talking to their papers.
Yes.
And you
Really
did
rapid.
rapidly and overlapping and saying different things.
And lying, yeah. So half of them were just making up stories, yeah.
Yeah, making up stories, all taking a different slant on the story,
Yep.
hearing what the previous guy said and deciding I better not say what I was going to say, I'll say a different slant, and just doing that effortlessly. It was really very impressive.
The other technology idea I had was that, these days newspaper stories, not many journalists actually write stories. They get, Associated Press or ChatGPT writes them. So, but I thought that Hildy might be renowned as like the best clickbait headline writer for social media, which I think is a far more important role.
Yeah.
So that could be where she comes in, and he doesn't want to lose that because you got to get your clicks somehow.
That's right. Or the person who organises the advertising.
Yes, that's another possibility. That's where all the money is in news.
Yeah.
Any others?
What about that whole subplot with the political people being corrupt? I mean, they were very corrupt. They were blatantly
They were willing
and openly
to have a man put to death so they could get re-elected.
and blatantly bribing people to say things that they didn't say, including a very stupid man who they were trying to bribe to say he never arrived, and he didn't understand that at all.
No.
But they were very corrupt, weren't they? I guess that could still be a subplot.
Yeah, except I don't think they'd be concerned about it these days.
No.
They just go, oh, well, we're corrupt. That's fine. Doesn't matter. Let's keep going.
It'd be more of a scandal if they weren't corrupt, if there was an honest one amongst them.
Yes. All right. Tributes, homages, remakes. As we mentioned, it was a play, the front page, and the play had been filmed about a decade earlier. But it was remade by Billy Wilder in 1974. And you may recall that we've discussed a Billy Wilder movie earlier in these best movie comparisons, because he did The Lost Weekend. And we compared The Lost Weekend to Spellbound. But in that version of the movie, Billy Wilder decided, I'm going to go back to Two Men. So
What the hell?
Very, very strange choice.
Well, no, we won't be watching that one.
No, we won't. And it was also turned into a kind of a version based on TV news in 1988, and that movie was called Switching Channels.
And presumably there was no capital punishment in that one.
I don't know. There's still capital punishment in the US in some states.
Yeah,
so
okay.
Maybe.
They set it in a state maybe where that was still going on.
I don't know. I must admit I have not seen the movie, so and I probably won't.
Maybe it wouldn't have been the same method. Yes.
Right. So this is where we'd ordinarily do the Oscar movie cinematic universe, and it's not entirely clear to me whether we should be trying to put Rebecca in the Oscar movie cinematic universe or this particular movie, His Girl Friday. But I think we could do both if we really had to.
We could. We probably should put Rebecca in.
Yeah, Rebecca does belong. Rebecca's the one that actually won Oscars. So.
Yes, that's right. Belongs up there with all those other wonderful Oscar winners.
Yeah. So the first thing that I thought of about Rebecca is that, we do have Mandalay as almost a main character of the movie. And I'd like to think that Phileas Fogg built that with some of his winnings from his around the world bets. So he got a lot of money out of that. He could have easily set up a beach house down there built Mandalay there, went down there and visited, and eventually, it was bequeathed to his various, relatives, whoever.
Ended up with
the De Winters.
The De Winters. Yes, I think that's probably pretty likely.
Did you have any links?
Well, I think we need to link Bruce in with The Lost Weekend because it feels like he fits nicely in that movie. The mournful drinking and the mournful... what was the name of the guy? Don?
Don, yeah. Don was... Yeah. I could certainly see Bruce, after being dumped by Hildy, that's getting into some drinking sessions with Don and losing several weekends. So, I could see that tying in there, despite the fact His Girl Friday did not win an Oscar. So let's go through the Hitchcock movie checklist. Do we have a MacGuffin?
I think really do. It's the crime or the person who's accused of being a police killer. It didn't really matter what that guy had done. There was actually too much of it in the movie anyway. They could have been asked to write any last-minute story or been at the courthouse for any kind of thing. It really wouldn't have mattered. So that's the MacGuffin. They were very concerned about it. Everyone wanted the story, but as an audience,
I could not have cared less about this guy.
Yeah.
And I think you could have actually skipped a step because they got this story and that led to showing the corruption of the mayor and the sheriff. I mean, you could have just had the reporters directly reporting on the corruption of the mayor and the sheriff.
Exactly.
But anyway, you'd still end up with pretty much the same final scene. Yeah.
And the police, I mean, I think the fact that they hid him in the desk was just that we want to get him out of the way because he's not very important. There was really it wasn't required at all.
He's as important as a piece of microfilm in the desk.
Yep.
What about a cameo?
No cameo. Where would you put him? Where would you put Hawks?
I think that you've got the newspaper room right at the beginning with, lots of people clacking away on typewriters and, running around. Easily throw a director in there.
Yeah. Does every movie with a newsroom require that sort of camera in motion of someone going from the elevator to the corner office?
Yes.
I mean, it's mandatory,
You've got
isn't it?
You've got to have it. There's no other way of showing that you're in a busy, bustling newsroom than
No other way
doing
at
that.
all.
Yep. The mother character?
Yeah, Bruce had a mother.
He sure did.
She was in and she was out. And she was pretty
She was in a
petrifying.
car crash. Did she come back from the car crash?
She did come back at some point.
I think she did. I think she
She
survived
was
the car
alive
crash.
at the end.
Yeah.
She was pretty unnecessary, but also just there to
comic relief.
Yeah, and to reiterate how bad the marriage would have been to Bruce.
Yep.
I think they were all going to live together.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, but I forgot that was part of the thing. They were going to live together for a year or something.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, Cary Grant was particularly dismissive of that idea. He thought that was, and rightly so.
Rightly
perhaps.
so.
What about a lead character at a standstill or on the run?
Well, Hildy was trying to be on the run.
Yes.
She didn't get very far. She didn't even get to the train. Bruce barely got further than the police station.
Yeah.
So I think that was good. I mean, she was trying to be. She was pretty much at a standstill. She was just trying to move on with her life.
Walter was making her at a standstill. She wanted to be on the run.
I mean, they did get handcuffed together at one point.
A good classic Hitchcock.
And that was
trope.
a wonderful analogy of exactly what was happening with her. She just tried to leave, but she couldn't.
Yep.
Same as all toxic men. It's very hard sometimes for the poor woman to leave.
Yep. Although she was only handcuffed for about 4 minutes of the movie, I think.
No, that's
they were
right.
handcuffed, and then all of a sudden tables were turned.
She was metaphorically handcuffed.
She was
to him,
metaphorically, yes. Which probably brings us to characters with elements of good and bad, and they're all pretty terrible, right?
They're all pretty terrible. I mean, maybe not Bruce, although he's willing to do anything to get an insurance claim.
Bruce has morally, I think he's okay, but he's so dopey.
Yeah.
Anyway, Walter's pretty much just an outright criminal. He's got guys who'll pickpocket and counterfeit money, and he doesn't care. He'll frame anybody.
Yeah, that's
terrible
right.
man.
He's really got no good in him except for a bit of self-obsessed intelligence. He's certainly very smart and witty, but he's just a psychopath, actually.
He dresses sharply.
Yeah, that's it. You can say that. Yeah.
I think Hildy's probably the closest to being morally grey because she's mostly doing the right thing. She's trying to save this wrongly accused man. She's doing it for money.
That's right. She was nice to him.
Yeah.
She did save him, tried to save him, put him in the desk, talked to him when he was, a condemned criminal, and nicer than anyone else had talked to him.
Yeah.
And she was also doing her best for the paper.
Yeah. But she also doesn't seem to care when Bruce, who loves her, just says, I'm out here. She says, I'll see you later. Doesn't even say see you later. She just keeps typing.
Doesn't even say see you later. Doesn't care less about the mother. So she's very obsessed with her own career.
Yes. What about an ordinary man / mistaken identity?
Just an ordinary man in Bruce, I guess.
Yeah. The bit I liked about Bruce being the ordinary man is that his identity is so unmistaken that Cary Grant does say that he looks exactly like Ralph Bellamy. So.
That's right. No mistaken identity here.
Yes.
We will even give your correct name in this movie. Yes. The smart young woman, though, is definitely Hildy, right?
Well, it's definitely not that woman who jumps out the window for no clear reason.
No, that's right.
Yes. And apparently, so if you read about this, you do read that the character of Lois Lane was apparently based on Hildy. This is technically a citation needed in Wikipedia.
But this is widely held belief, right?
It is a widely held belief. Lois technically predates Hildy by about a year because the first Superman comic came out in 1938.
Hildy may be based on Lois.
It's hard to tell. Yeah, maybe, but all comic book characters evolve over time. Like Superman couldn't fly when he started; he could just leap tall buildings. So they all evolve, and it's certainly possible that this was only a couple of years after Lois Lane was invented. She could certainly have developed much of Hildy's characteristics
from someone
from someone who'd seen this
the
movie,
movie.
seen how popular it is, loved it, thought, yes, Lois needs to be more like that. Next time they write a Superman comic, that's what Lois Lane is like.
And certainly the Lois Lane we see in the movies was no doubt influenced.
Yes.
I mean, just even the suits that she wears in some of those programs, either the TV or the movies, it's incredible how much, particularly the TV series actually, how similar the outfits are to exactly what Hildy's wearing in this.
Yeah, well, I knew nothing about this theory that Lois Lane and Hildy were the same, and that was like instantly watching this movie, I thought she's very Lois Lane in this movie.
Yep.
And kind of related to this, amusingly, that film I mentioned before, the Switching Channels one, the remake, that starred Burt Reynolds was Walter in that movie. Kathleen Turner was Hildy, but Christopher Reeve was Bruce.
Oh, for goodness sake.
So there you go.
Yeah.
So it's a tiny link back to the Lois Lane thing there.
Yes, that's great.
What about bumbling cops?
Bumbling officials.
Bumbling
public servants.
Yeah, lots of bumbling. The way Williams escaped, did I hear this right? They gave him the gun to reenact the crime?
Yes. So that was the psychiatrist and the jail keeper who was a completely bumbling idiot.
Yeah.
And then the guy who came to deliver the stay of execution was also a complete bumbling
lots
fool.
of idiots.
They were really good actually, which is you get that character in a screwball comedy, right?
Yes, very, very funny.
What other tropes did you find?
So I just got a few here from tvtropes.org. So this is actor illusion, and this refers to what you mentioned before, the Archie Leach being Cary Grant's birth name. So he mentions that. And again, similarly, the celebrity paradox. This is how nobody usually mentions that characters in movies look like movie stars, but that was done in this one. So Bruce was described as looking like Ralph Bellamy.
Nicely done. And it just reminds me, we've just done the review of the Barbie movie and how we also have a mention of the actor's name within that movie as well.
Yes. Yep. So and if you want to listen to that recap of Barbie, it's available on our Patreon, just a couple of bucks a month, or yours, along with a zillion other podcasts that we've covered over the years. The Disposable Fiance, poor old Bruce. Very disposable. And of course, a classic, the last minute reprieve. I think pretty much everybody on death row in a movie gets a last minute reprieve.
That's right. That's the only place you ever want to be on death row.
Yeah, in Hollywood.
In a movie. In Hollywood, yeah.
Yes. So let's do some comparison now between His Girl Friday and Rebecca and see if we can work out what His Girl Friday would have had to have done to get some Oscar juice. Usually this is the other way around, as we mentioned. Usually we're trying to get Hitchcock some Oscar buzz from these other movies.
Yeah.
This time we're trying to steal some Oscar buzz from Hitchcock.
That's right. And so you would have to pretty much squeeze every bit of humour out of His Girl Friday.
Yeah, there's not a lot in Rebecca, is there?
There's almost nothing. I mean, there is in the book. We've talked about this before. There's a little bit in Rebecca, but it's much more subtle than Hitchcock would usually present.
Yep.
So, and certainly no screwball elements at all.
Yeah, everyone would have to take their turns saying their lines. No talking over one another.
And also, David O. Selznick never allowed anyone to ad-lib anything. Yeah. I mean, Hitchcock wasn't even allowed to change the tiniest bit of the plot of that movie. He tried his best. So it's almost the complete opposite. No ad-libbing at all. Stick completely to the script. Yep. And what's more, no woman in this.
No, yeah. Hildy got to go back to a man.
You've got to go back to being a man, and it has to be completely within the exact intention of whatever was in the original book play, whatever tedious, dull, blokey, conversation was in there, which I presume that was all of it.
Yep. So that's the first thing that His Girl Friday has to do. I think the second thing it has to do is Bruce's mother should not have been so easily dealt with. I can't imagine Mrs. Danvers just being picked up and carried out of a room. No. Can you imagine somebody trying that on Mrs. Danvers? She'd
definitely not.
Kill them with a glare.
And also, Mrs. Danvers in that role would have been a lot more scary. So big, long. I mean, she was wearing, I think, a very formidable outfit in this as well. But she didn't have enough oomph, did she?
No. What else have we got?
So I think this is a good suggestion of yours that maybe Bruce should have been referred to as the soon-to-be second Mr. Hildy Johnson and not had a name at all.
Yeah, I think that would have been much better.
That would have been really adding to the comedy here, I
Yeah,
think.
I think so,
That would have been really great.
I mean, he got all the same psychological torment that the second Mrs. De Winter got. So, yeah, he's pretty much a one-to-one mapping.
Yeah, he truly did. And I mean, he got put in jail a number of times. We didn't do that with the second Mrs. De Winter.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. And yeah, what else? I think we needed perhaps to accuse the main protag male of murder. So Walter Burns should have been accused of murder, as he indeed was in, spoiler alert, in Rebecca.
Yeah.
We should have done a spoiler for Rebecca.
Nah, people know.
Everyone listening to this has seen Rebecca
Yes.
by now.
If you haven't, I'm sorry.
We've podcasted about it twice.
Yep.
If you haven't, it's your own fault.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So, but yes, you're right. I mean, he could easily. I mean, there's plenty of murders going on. They could have said he threw that woman out the window.
Yeah,
There you
that's
go.
exactly right.
And finally, I think you just burned down the press room for the
Yes.
final scene of the movie. That's
Yep.
it.
Fantastic.
There you go. Now you've got a few Oscars there. All right. So let's rank where Rebecca fits with our Oscar movies.
All of our Oscar movies. So
all the Oscar movies that we've covered so far. We could throw in His Girl Friday, but Rebecca will be the one that we'll stick with going forward.
So where are you putting it?
I would put Rebecca at number 3, I think. I prefer Gaslight. So I've got The Godfather, Gaslight, and then Rebecca. I think
Yep.
Rebecca's my number 3, just ahead of Wings.
Okay, that's interesting. I've actually also put mine in exactly the same slot as you, behind Gaslight and in front of Wings. So
Okay.
for me, that puts Rebecca in at number 2.
Number 2.
Because I don't like The Godfather.
No, Godfather
except
down at number 5.
I enjoyed The Godfather as it was portrayed in Barbie.
Yes, as a Barbie reference.
That's
where,
right.
Where would you put His Girl Friday, just out of curiosity?
Yeah, I haven't really thought about that. Let
I
me
know
see.
exactly where I'm putting it. I'm putting mine in between Wings and Marty. It's certainly not going below Marty. I think was Marty your bottom? Marty is your bottom.
Marty's my bottom, and I can remember nothing about it.
Yeah, Marty was that butcher who
Oh, for God's sake. I do remember him now. I don't need to remember him. I think I would also say, I think I might even be putting His Girl Friday. No, I'm not going to put it above Wings just because it had that flat spot for me, those dull sections. I'm putting it behind Wings, but above You Can't Take It With You.
You Can't Take It With You was like 100% screwball mayhem, all those crazy people in that house.
That's
Too
right,
much
and
of
I prefer His Girl Friday, and just purely for Cary Grant. But I do. Wings was such a surprise for me. I knew I would love Gaslight.
Yep.
I knew I loved that, but Wings was such a surprise. I think Wings remains number 3, and we can slot in His Girl Friday for me under Wings.
So that means we both prefer Rebecca to His Girl Friday, which I think is probably right.
Yes.
But what will our next movie be? We did give you the clue a little bit earlier.
The clue was the reason why Alma wasn't credited for this film, and it was 3 letters, 4 letters, 8 letters, a 3-word title. Only a few 3-word titles.
And of course, a question mark clue in a cryptic crossword usually means what?
So it means the clue is in itself a complete clue. There's no parts to it. You don't have to split up this sentence in order to find the clue.
But it's usually coming at kind of an oblique angle.
That's right.
Yes.
And you need to take the intention of the entire sentence together. So the reason why Alma wasn't credited for this film is why she never was credited for any films, and that is because she was in the background. And another way of saying she was in the background is The Lady Vanishes.
Yes, so that will be our next movie. We will rewatch The Lady Vanishes from 1938. We both really like this one. It's in my top 10. It's number 7 for me. And where did you rank it?
Oh, it's number 2 for me.
Yeah.
I love this movie, and I'm so glad that we only watched it fairly recently, and I'm so glad we're getting another rewatch really quickly because you get so much more out of a movie if you watch it twice in a row, I think.
So it's unlikely that it'll be bumped higher in the rankings for you on the rewatch.
Yeah,
It's,
certainly unlikely. I mean, it could go down. You never know.
Yeah. Anyway, we will rewatch it and we will let you know our updated thoughts on it next month. So if you do have any questions or feedback on The Lady Vanishes, you can email them to us. We're feedback@hitchpodonline.com, and we'll do our best to answer any of your questions in the next episode. The movie is also based on a book called The Wheel Spins. That's a 1936 mystery novel by Ethel Lena White. And that's actually in the public domain in Australia, so you can get it via Project Gutenberg. In other countries, I'm not sure it is in the public domain. I have no idea how any of that works, but it's very cheap to find on online bookstores. You could probably borrow from a library. So if you want to read that and join us in the book club, you can do so. That will be over at our Patreon. That's patreon.com/HitchPod. Join us there for a couple of bucks a month. Otherwise, we will speak to you all next month.
Thank you for listening to HitchPod. Please come and talk to us on Twitter at HitchPod Tweets or on Facebook by searching for HitchPod. And you can also email us directly at feedback@hitchpodonline.com. And if you want more Hitchcock content, please consider becoming a HitchPod supporter. Just go to patreon.com/HitchPod. And for as little as $2 a month, you can get access to our Season 1 coverage of every single Hitchcock movie, as well as bonus episodes on Hitchcock-esque movies. Invitations also to watch live rewatches and much, much more.